Okay, I don't know what happened. Anyways, good morning, and I haven't posted in a while. I just wanted to come on here because I had a situation recently that reminded me why I do this, why I make videos, and why I put stuff out into the world. I had an instance of where I feel like the double empathy problem was at work. And I wanted to invite you to my Halloween porch to do this video. This was my pumpkin that I carved last night. He has a little bit of a sad face just because I feel like there's a lot going on in the world. And um, yeah, it's been like stressy and just kind of hard to sometimes to to interface with. But yeah, I actually had a desire to come on here and speak because yeah, there's still just a lot of misinformation out there about what the inside of an autistic person is like. I was doing a lot of research that I like to do because psychology is my special interest, and I was researching about BPD, the borderline personality disorder, and I was researching about bipolar and the differences and the nuances. Anyways, one of the videos of he was a psychologist and he was talking about BPD versus autism and some of the things that came on there, and they said they were reading from the DSM, I believe, which in my opinion and a lot of people's opinions in psychology fields is just inherently flawed because a lot of it is based on really old research done in uh, white boys and done in the lens of really somebody that was ex- exposing this double empathy problem. um, I also wanted to put in a plug because I feel like what I say is going to be, or I just want to put in a caveat, I guess. What I say is going to be indicative of sort of my experience. And I believe that because I have this flavor of autism, that is the hyper empathy, mostly falling to that category, it manifests itself or looks different or it feels different to me. Every autistic person's going to be a little bit different. But I think I took an interest in Myers Briggs, and when I type myself, I always type as an INFJ. And I think that this flavor of autism is really very represented in the INFJ Myers Briggs subtype. It just seems very overlapping to my autistic experience, anyways. Uh, so, without further ado, I'm going to go over the DSM 5 criteria for an autism diagnosis and relate it to my experience specifically, but also, I think, like the experience of me being an INFJ, because I think that is interesting. Anyways, so number one, deficits in social emotional reciprocity, abnormal back and forth, and normal back and forth, and yeah, lack of normal back and forth in conversation. So this does on the surface look like something I actually really didn't understand before I understood that I was autistic, was that there's these unwritten social rules. And some of you, if you're neurotypical watching this, are going to be like, yeah. Maybe even some of you that are autistic will get this, but I really didn't understand that you're supposed to, when somebody asks you a question, they are essentially volleying you a ball, and you're supposed to volley it back with them with a similar question. I think that this, when they say deficits, they're talking about the lack of an autistic person returning the ball back. So if you say, like, for example, how did your day go? And then that's just a like really hard question for me to answer ever, but because there's just so much information. But you're supposed to answer and then say back, how did your day go? So there's a lot of things that are going into play with this in my sense, but I think as I relate it to my me as an autistic person and me as an INFJ in general, I have a very strong preference for internal privacy. I feel like somebody's internal landscape is got to be extremely diverse and intricate and just kind of a sanctuary for them. For me, it is. And what comes out to another person is very much represented and filtered through what do I want to share, what is interesting to me, and also what is not entirely revealing of the vast internal landscape that I have. What am I okay and comfortable with sharing with you? It's always filtered through that lens. So I wouldn't necessarily ask somebody a question back because it would feel invasive. It does feel invasive when people would ask questions that I might not want to speak about. So I kind of use that lens and through my perception being like, if somebody wants to tell me something, that I would give them autonomy in telling me that. So me probing with questions, unless they already brought up the topic and I'm trying to understand what they said more, I wouldn't necessarily feel like that would be how I would go about interacting with somebody. So I think that is like the representative double empathy problem, because they would feel like I'm not interested or engaging with them, and I would feel like I was giving them a lot of grace and space to show up, how they chose to. So that's one thing. Second, deficits in non-verbal communication. So this is interesting. Like, I guess it's more, your face or your body gestures aren't representing, your feelings or your internal, your desires, and you're not like engaging back with the person. I think there's also some aspects of mirroring here. So this kind of goes back to, for me, in my experience, and I think for other autistic people, and probably for INFJs too, I don't really have the ability to know always what my face and body is doing. I feel like I say things, and the content of my words and what I speak is really the representation of what I desire to say and connect with the other person. Focusing on my body is distracting. For me, I will lose track of what I want to communicate. So I don't necessarily feel it's a deficit, because I am saying and connecting and conveying the things that I want to convey in my words, what I say, I'm not thinking about how do I make my face or my hands or mirror what my intention is. My intention comes through because of what I say. Um, but I can see how that would be maybe, interpreted in a way that is not connecting with the other person because I'm not making gestures as they are. So, and how this relates to as an INFJ, I don't know. I think it's a complete overlap, honestly. I feel like I connect best with somebody when I'm expressing in my words. And I am observing them in their um, nonverbal communication. And I'm picking up a lot of information from what they do and from how they move and from what they don't say. So there's a complete analysis running at all times, and that's my INFJ experience with everyone. There's a lot of things that people say and the way that they non-verbally communicate that don't actually represent what's going on underneath, and I see that stuff that's underneath. um, and it's odd for me to have this continuous dual experience with people in life. They don't say what's underneath. They often are saying what's the rules are expected, what the social rules are to make the situation comfortable. But I don't usually feel that pressure. Um, okay. Restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. Um, I'm sorry, my verbal is like it's mess. Repetitive motor, insistence on sameness, fixed interests in intensity, abnormal intensity, hyper or hypo responses to stressors. I think I have to break this down one by one. Repetitive motor patterns. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really feel like this is much different for autistic people versus uh, not allistic people, not autistic people. I think we all have repetitive motor patterns. Stims, I think, is stims is what we call it, and everybody does this. It's just that you might notice it in autistic people because they don't feel like or have the ability to hide it. I do feel like it's probably more noticeable. And I have had uh, I have internal cognitive stims that I do too. I mean, I think everybody does have these things, and it's just that the outside taking in, as much information as we take in, sometimes those stims are used to help us like focus because there's a lot of information coming in. So if we are talking to somebody or interacting with somebody and we're taking in all that information, um, we have to do something to like sort of, the way that I filter that is to put a focus on something smaller or something closer so that I can try and like not consider all the information. Of course I am going to consider all the information, like it doesn't go away. All that information comes in. I'm probably going to have to incorporate that information. I will incorporate that information post conversation. But yeah, that's, I think, what it is for me. And I don't know. I think as an INFJ, um, yeah, I think that I am so feeling like, especially if I'm in a natural environment or even not, like there's so many things that are so beautiful and curious and like in my environment that I want to interact with, and it's sometimes kind of distracting to me because I feel so connected with nature. And so I'm, where I live is very rural, and I feel so comfortable here because there is just a constant nature that feels very, I feel very connected to it emotionally. I feel spiritually really, really connected with it. I feel calm in nature where things are patterned and predictable, and I can interface with them. Them I call, I mean, I feel like trees are very much beings that I interface with. Um, so they don't ask anything of me. We can just be together. And I feel like that's a very INFJ experience. If I have a person in my realm, in my world that I'm interfacing with, that I have to talk with, um, and then I also want to talk with. I don't want to say that I don't. There are people that I don't, but most people are fine. I have to really focus on them, and that is sort of sad when I have to disconnect from nature a bit sometimes. But I also want that person to feel valued and important to me. So I use stims to kind of in that way. That was long. In insistence on sameness. Okay, this one is really just not understood, like by allistic, non-autistic people. Just completely not understood. An autistic person that is not stressed out does not have as much insistence on sameness. An autistic person that is left to their devices may develop routines just like anybody else would, but the insistence on sameness really comes because y'all are fucking stressful, okay? People in the world are really just chaotic. Y'all are chaotic. And I hate to break it to you, but you just, you aren't predictable. Um, and you do things that are unpredictable. I felt like this since I was a kid and like a very small child. And I would see other children and adults never be consistent in the way that they act and the way and what they speak. They don't do. And so you're just going through the world doing things impulsively and on the moment. And it is draining for me to have to keep up with that. I do appreciate other human beings, and I want to interact with them, but y'all really drain me. And I think that I would say that for an INFJ too. The insistence on sameness is really a coping mechanism for predicting how much energy expenditure I'm going to have to give in any particular situation. So if I have things the same, if I do things the same, I have my if I'm going out, I have my backpack, or I kind of like large bags because I like to have everything that I could possibly want. I don't want to have to be asking somebody for something. Uh, I like things in the same pockets, and I know where it is because I want to be able to take account for the energy that is going to be required in any given situation, and like have that be like fair, things be fairly predictable. So my son is autistic, and he is probably an INTJ. I thought he was an INFJ when he was younger, but he's kind of looking more like an INTJ now. He's much more interested in, less interested in people and much more interested in like ideas and like engineering type stuff, building things, figuring things out, planning how to do projects like that. He loves thinking about his mountain biking parts and things like that. So he's not as focused on people like an INFJ would be. I like thinking about anything related to how people interact with each other, like the inner workings of people, through like current events and past events, and just thinking about that. It's just much more for me. My special interest is like social and people dynamics and understanding that, probably because I don't naturally, it is something that I like, I study, partly to know myself the differences. But anyways, yeah, so insistence on sameness is more just an autistic person's way to be in the world and knowing how much they need to hold back or prepare for, because energy draining. People are energy draining because they require a lot from us, because you're not sane, you're not consistent. So we try to make other things in our life consistent. And it is, if you're seeing an increase in those insistence on sameness, that is a stressed person. That is a stressed autistic person. When my son's demands of school, or he engages in extracurricular activities, which he does like, his insistence on sameness increases. So he will eat the same thing for breakfast. He will, have the same lunch. He will get up and do things the same way, predictably, consistently, because he is preparing himself to hold back the energy to make decisions, to do things differently, because he needs that energy for the other things in his life. That's a stressed autistic response. All of these are, could be considered stressed responses. Fixed interest, abnormal in intensity. I mean, I guess, yeah. So we like to learn. So my fixed interests kind of, they might change. I think that's more because I got a little flare of ADHD type stuff, and I might jump around, but not, to like interest and stuff, and like to learn something. And as soon as I learn it in enough that I feel like I could do it, I might switch it. But there are some things that are consistently relevant to me, and I think I spoke to that just recently as an INFJ. Like, people are a particular interest and a special interest, and it definitely more intense than other people. But like, I don't know, I feel like I would be very, very bored in my life if I didn't have intense interests. I think as an IN anything, we are very interested in developing our internal landscape experience. And it's vast, and it's nuanced, and it's just incredibly a wonderful place to live a lot of the time. So learning anything really just enhances and brings more diversity to our internal experience. So yeah, it's very much an experience of intense interests, because we have an intense drive to learn and develop our internal landscape. And I honestly really don't understand how people would not have. And you know, honestly, I think that everybody does have intense interests. It's just that some people have more socially acceptable ones, or hidden ones that, or they don't share their like interests in collecting, like, you know, Russian tea cups or something. I don't know. They don't tell people. I just made that up. Um, Hyper or hypo responses to sensory aspects and environment. Um, Based on whose measure, I guess. Um, I think can go back to like. I think some of these things is like, you know, maybe just kind of more like the nervous system's differences or something. So this is like really hard to explain, I think, or maybe I don't know. I'm really curious if other INFJs have this experience. This is my experience. I have a very strong nervous system connection to my external environment. It is a wonderful thing and a terrible thing at the same time. Um, I experience beauty so incredibly, amazingly, intensely, like natural beauty, art, like music. It's just, it connects into it's like it taps into my nervous system and roots, and it's just like vibrates and creates like these experiences in my brain and in my body that just feel like what I think people must feel like when they take ecstasy or something. Um, and it sounds crazy, but I can have these experiences where I feel like this energy from the thing that I'm interacting like swirls through my feet and up, you know, through my body, and it just feels like I am so connected with the 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 environment or the thing that I'm interfacing with. Just like wind blowing like a tree, or leaves, like especially this time of year, we're just past peak uh leaf season, but something about a strong wind blowing all these colors of leaves and swirling it up, and like just visually seeing that, it's like wow. Like for me it just feels like art is all around, and I see such details, and I think that is an autistic person's lens a lot of the time. The tiny little veins and deep in leaves and the details, and like in the morning when I wake up and there's like water dripping off a leaf, or a spider web that has this dew on it. It just feels like it connects within my very soul and gives me assurances for my existence, that I am connected and a part of everything because I can feel it. I can feel like that. So is that hyper empathy? I mean, a hypersensitive response? I mean, maybe it is, but I feel sad for people that don't have that experience too. And hypo responses to sensory, I think that's just mostly when I might have a hypo, but it's usually when I'm disconnected and there's too much going on. Like, you know, if I'm at a busy, like, I'll say, I think every autistic person is like, I hate grocery shopping. If I'm at the grocery store, there's just too much information coming in. Too much. There's like noises, there's people, there's like decisions to be made, everything. So I sort of have a hypo response because I'm like, I just shut down and I'm like dissociated from things. And because it's just would be too overwhelming. It's just like there are times when I can't go to the grocery store because I don't have the capabilities of blocking it out. I use tools now to help me, like, you know, which I didn't understand before when I went grocery shopping, and then I'd be like tired for like the rest of the day. But now I wear earplugs. Sometimes I just wear my sunglasses, or I pre-load it so that I take my sensory experience into account like the day before I go. So I'm giving like a sensory system a break. Always is thinking as an autistic person about that, giving my sensory system a break. The sensory systems that are difficult for me, light is one big one, and sound. I don't have as many issues with smell, but a lot of people do have smell. I don't know how you would block that out except just trying not to expose yourself to like cooking smells or things that are offensive. Anyway, so that is that. That's the DSM, and it says symptoms must be present, in children, but may not fully manifest until social pressures increase. Yeah, some of these things, when you see most children, they're just like going through the world and interacting in the way that feels good to them. And then when social pressures tell them that they can't do those things, or they can't think that way, or they can't express themselves that way, or they have to do things, yeah, that can stress somebody out. and the stress can make some of these things more obvious. And that's just more like a stressed person's responses to dealing with chaos. So I think I want to go back to the situation that happened to me in this double empathy problem. I think this really is a very INFJ thing to say, and it's also very much an autistic person's also thing. I don't know if every autistic person will relate to this, but I think a lot will, and I know that INFJs will. I think every INFJ I've ever encountered has this experience. So the situation was that in discussion with someone I'm close to, they were expressing their frustration about a world event, specifically just them having struggles emotionally with the stuff that's going on with the Israeli and Palestine just genocide, and talking with me about it. And my response was very avoidant. And on the surface, this can look like lack of empathy. It's not that. And in autistic people, avoiding emotional topics or responding in a way that looks sort of avoidant could be for a number of reasons. So I have a very hard time interfacing with the news. I have a hard time, and honestly, a lot of the time I am not engaging with current events, particularly as they're presented in the news and in newspapers, because one, as it's going, I don't get to choose what is being given to me. If there's news going, I don't have the ability to control what is being given to me. And I know there's a lot more nuance in the story than is being given to me. So there's a lack of desire to get quick sound bites is part of it. But also a part of it is I will feel things so deeply that and and I won't be able to really cut that off. I will feel the pain of another human being so intensely and strongly, even things that I have not experienced myself. It will manifest itself within my body. So my nervous system is so interconnected with my environment that if I see a news story where children are dying, um, I will I will feel that. I will feel the pain. I will feel the terror. I will feel that like it is happening currently. And that is traumatizing. And I have to have that, like, sort of, that thing that I described about the grocery store. If I'm going to be able to engage with the news, that has to be there. I have to have the capacity to have that. Otherwise, everything that I take in will be like a micro trauma. And for autistic people, the world in general can be very micro traumas, like always, like in the way that we are perceived, the way that we are judged, and just things happening in the world that we see that is like just messed up, messed up. And I say we, I don't mean to speak for everybody. I see the world as a very messed up place. I see people being very traumatized and not knowing it. I see things happening in the world where there's a total lack of respect for human life. And it's just overwhelmingly horribly to consider. So, in an experience where someone is conveying how frustrated they are, if I'm in a place where I can sort of have that block up, I might be able to show up for them and 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 respond appropriately. But if I'm in a place where I can't, I will look disengaged because I'm sort of like self protecting my very raw nervous system. Um, or I'll want to not talk about the topic because it's just more than I can manage. Uh, I think everybody does that, but in different extremes. So that is kind of an issue of a double empathy problem. The person that I was interacting with thought that I didn't care, but the problem is more that I care too much. Um, or I, in that space time, I was in a place where I didn't have the bandwidth to. And that usually varies depending upon, the things that I've had to engage with uh, in my life, and, you know, or the things that are going on with my children or something that I'm having to help them through. So, yeah, I think that I just wanted to speak with that. Autistic people do not lack empathy. That is a fallacy. It is incredibly harmful. And if I hear a creator or a content creator saying that as a categorization of autistic people, I will absolutely be commenting because it is just so untrue. We may not show it externally, but empathy is there. There are different kinds of ways of showing empathy, and that is going to differ in every person and differ in every autistic person, but we definitely don't have a lack of empathy. In fact, I would argue the opposite. I would argue that we get overwhelmed by feeling the distress of other people and feeling the distress of the world and how incredibly complicated and and mean the world can be, um, and things just aren't as simple as just valuing each other's experience and each other's lie. That creation and life being as it is in its way that it shows up is just such a valuable thing that when we see it being tainted, destroyed, dismissed, it's much more a very hard thing to understand. And we feel that. So that is kind of how I want to express this, and I want to convey that very strongly, that we do not have a lack of empathy. And please, if you are a holistic person, a non-autistic person, don't use that as a benchmark for determining if somebody's autistic or not, or say that. It's really harmful. And I know that the people that come here probably will already know this, but yeah, just I want to say that as a final note. Yeah, your experiences are valid. The way that you go through the world is valid. Life is stressful and chaotic for everybody, but for an autistic person is probably much more so. So take care of yourself. Do what you need to do to make yourself feel good. Spend time in nature. Love each other. The end.